What I'm going to ask the panelists is that each one of them is going to introduce themselves and is going to tell us a couple of things that's important for the audience. Is what do you guys do? And what do you guys want to do? And what do you guys want to talk about? So I have like some questions, but I have too many questions, so we'll see if we can just grab them all. So please.
Okay, hello?
You should be on.
Okay. So my name is Bill Fuller. The name of my company is called the Barlington Group. My partner and I founded it in 2004. We mainly invest in retail, small retail properties, generally below $5 million. We've been investing in the urban core, and I would say that our specialty is in the Little Havana neighborhood on Calle Ocho. We have about 40 assets in that particular zone, about 250,000 square feet of retail amongst the portfolio. Additionally to that, I have another partnership that it's a hospitality concept where one of our assets is the Ball and Chain, which is a bar on Calle Ocho.
If you guys cannot hear us, it's because you're talking too much.
Hello, my name is Bernado Rieber. I am originally from Venezuela, but have been here since 2000, always involved in the construction industry. I'm a structural engineer, and here became a certified general contractor. Originally started working in residential developments, but over time learned that there are way more benefits working in commercial. So right now we are developing two projects in a niche market right next to the Aventura Hospital. And we'll discuss later in detail the opportunities for investors in these commercial developments.
Hello, Carlos Chavarro, Colombian, living here for more than 15 years. And in the last 6 years, I've been a lot involved with office condos, mainly in the Miami-Dade market. Nowadays, we're coming in with a new project called Forum Aventura. It's an office condo project right in front of the Aventura Mall. And the way that we see the market, the tendencies of the market with the offices, we see these, we can call them emerging markets like Aventura, being a great opportunity for this kind of product, office condos. I work along with AG Real Estate Advisors, and we've been coming along with office condos for the last, I would say, decade. And we have successfully brought in this kind of product to different markets, in Coral Gables, in Brickell, downtown Miami. And now we're coming out of these primary markets into other markets based on the way that we see population growth and transit-oriented problems. We have seen the tendency of having this kind of product growing into other areas. We'll discuss it in detail later.
Well, one of my questions is, you guys are investors, so how do you, why did you pick a place? How do you see, like William was talking, Little Havana. What did you see in Little Havana as an investor to start?
Well, with regards to Little Havana, I'm a little gringo, but my parents are Cuban, so for me it was more of like a heritage thing. When I landed in Little Havana in 2004, it was a little bit odd to me to see so many tourists starting to be attracted to the neighborhood and yet provide so little to be able to enhance that experience. And so the Little Havana real estate play for me has been a little bit two-pronged in a sense, because there's been a vertical integration with the tourism there. And since we've invested heavily in there, we've seen the proliferation of the tourism. And today, we're receiving about 4 million visitors a year, which is about 1 out of every 4 visitors coming to Miami-Dade. So, but the opportunity in Little Havana when we started to buy in there was that the fundamentals worked. It was close to the urban core. I still think it's one of the most central areas in all of Miami-Dade. We call it the Corazon because you know, the Gables to the west and downtown and Brickell to the east and Coconut Grove to the south and the airport and the beach, equidistant. So I still believe that there's a very long runway to be able to increase the density in Little Havana. Little Havana historically has always been one of the most dense neighborhoods in all of Miami-Dade County. And there's just a lot of opportunity. The land mass is 2.5 square miles. That would be the equivalent of taking every neighborhood from the roads all the way up through the design district and smashing it into one neighborhood. So when people talk about Little Havana, I often say you really have to study what you're talking about. Is it the Cayocho district? Is it the stadium area? Is it the river area? Is it the East Little Havana West Brickell line? Is it the Inter-American campus that's on 27th Avenue? So it's a very large landmass. And I see that I saw it as a frontier. And like many of the urban core, I think if you invested in any area in the last 10 years in the urban core of the city of Miami, you've done very, very well. So I think that, I was fortunate, but I have a love affair with that particular neighborhood.
Bernardo, same question, same idea.
Well, I agree that the entire South Florida has incredible potential. So in commercial, you should be fine almost anywhere. But yes, you have to pick an area. After the crisis in 2007, I decided to find niche markets where the investment for me and for the condo buyers is the most stable possible. So we acquired land in an area called the Aventura Medical District, which has these characteristics of serving a zip code, which is the 33180 Aventura, which is pretty stable, and within an area designated as medical district. And that was the main reason. I happen to live in Aventura as well, so of course that helps. And lastly, many of the international investors that come to Miami, which is, as we know, a great source of clients, like Aventura and investing near Aventura Mall. So those are the reasons why I chose that area.
Carlos.
Well, for office condos, there's pretty much, we look into two different kind of investors, the end user and the investor as such, which in our case tends to be a lot of the international investor, South American, a lot of them. So when we went looking, we encountered that in Aventura specifically, we were talking about the increasing population in Southeast. So the tendency that we're seeing is people started working where they live. And when we started identifying in Aventura is demographics were great. There's a wealthy community. It's starting to get more dense every time, in not only Aventura, but in neighborhoods around it. We see Surfside, we see Bal Harbor, we see Sunny Isles, we see Hollywood, Hallandale. And all these cities around Aventura keep on growing, but people keep on going to Aventura because, like they mentioned it, it's well recognized worldwide. Everyone referenced the mall. The mall has around 30 million visitors a year. And, and you have restaurants and things that you can, of course, invite your clients to eat. So we were identifying that a lot of the vacancies in that specific market were much lower than the vacancies in the overall market. So we're looking at demographics. We were looking at market conditions. We were pretty good. And actually, demographics were backing up rents as well. Rents, the average price per square foot on that market nowadays was reaching the same numbers as Brickell and downtown Miami, being, of course, Brickell probably 4 times the size in office, like 10 million square feet you have in Brickell to around only 2.5 million square feet of office in the Aventura market. But still, people for convenience, not having to travel or commute to these other markets, they were starting to rent and lease all these spaces. So we saw an opportunity there. We saw an opportunity to come in with a luxury product. And so far, we're doing great.
I have when you're talking about investment, I always think, okay, you need to put together a project, need to finance it, and need to sell it or keep it or rent it. How you guys are doing with financing? What is your source of financing? We try to do the same order so we have the idea.
So I think For me, financing started on my business with $10,000, and my initial platform for financing was hard money. So it was private funding. It was all about identifying the right opportunities and leveraging them as much as possible with high yield debt. And so with the idea that once you could restabilize those assets, you could then go into the market and secure traditional forms of financing, which worked great pre-recession. And then post-recession, where funding dried up, that was private money, and sourcing was the easiest way to go as well for a period of, I would say we were implementing that strategy from 2009 all the way through 15. It provided a lot of advantages to go to friends and family and get that type of capital because it was fast, it was efficient, you didn't have to go through the hurdles of the banks and their underwriting and all of that. And then more recently, of course, the lending appetite has increased significantly, especially over the last 2 years. The rates have been very attractive, and we've consolidated all of the original loans that we had with private financing through either commercial mortgage-backed securities, CMBS, or a lot of local banks. I say that there are plenty of community banks that have a hungry appetite to work with property owners in Miami. I love community banks because in a community bank, you get the president to go out to the property, to walk it with you, to understand the asset. They're investing in you. They're relating that information to the board. In many cases, I've had opportunities where I've walked with an entire board lending committee out to a property and really had the opportunity to explain to them the asset. And once you do well by them, their entire credit limit, mostly they're maxed out. The smaller ones are maxed out around 5 or 6 million. Others are in the $10 to $15 million range. But they will come back to you and they become an open source to lend on as many projects as you have. Finding the projects, that's the next issue.
Okay.
Well, in particular, the project that we are introducing today, which is called Ivory 214, and we have a booth in the back, is a mixed-use project that has half of it is a hotel. It's going to be a Hilton hotel, extended stay, and the other half are offices, condominium offices that we're selling. So this project in particular, we're going to finance via pre-sales of the condo offices, via EB5, which is, as you know, a very interesting thing in the market. And as you mentioned, there are local lenders that love to invest in Miami. We're working with a group from Brazil that is actually lending at a pretty good rates without all the delays that traditional banks take. So those are basically the three ways of financing.
Carlos?
Yeah, on specifically Forum, the same thing. Community banks are the ones being more aggressive. We have found them to actually be knocking on our doors. Of course, all of them making us have, of course, pre-sales, 50-60% pre-sales before they come in with construction loans. So at the beginning, there's a lot of the friends and family, a little bit of getting some of equity in at the beginning, and then trying to catch up with sales to be able to get there. But the community banks, the local banks, we find them to be the most aggressive and willing to come in nowadays.
Yeah, on those lines, the banks are really stepping into the plate, but I hear a lot of crowdfunding, now Bitcoins, that I learned today, and I'm overwhelmed, by the way. I need to invest. Have you thought of going, I don't know, crowdfunding or Bitcoins or?
I think crowdfunding is just like the sexy new internet term for like what we always used to do anyways, is go out to as many friends and family and offer them an investment opportunity. And generally speaking, when that investment opportunity works out, then they become, investors for life. And so I have heard of situations where people have used the current crowdfunding platforms that exist out on the internet, where they've assembled maybe 15 to 20 investors. They've had a very successful run with that first round of investment. And now off the grid, off the internet platform, which is simply a marketing platform, those investors have become long-term investors with those particular firms. So it's what the internet has provided for us is the ability to take an offering memorandum, disseminate it to, to all of our contacts in a much more efficient manner. Also, it provides a great platform to be able to communicate with your investors ongoing during the development process. It has become more efficient, but from crowdsourcing, it's just, for me, that's the new term of what we've always been doing in a sense.
Yes. Well, I have talked to a couple of crowdfunding companies, and I am still doing the financing through the traditional way with, let's say, less investors. This crowdfunding has two ways of working. In one of them, they find the investors for a fee, of course, and then you suddenly have 5,000 investors. And they even sell you a software to manage the internal communications. I mean, it's hard with 8 people. And so I really, that one, I totally said no. The other one is like, they are your partner and they have the 5,000 people behind them. I mean, I use 5,000 people because typically they invest 20, 25,000 per investor, and if you need 20 million, you need a bunch of people. So that one I would consider, I would talk to the people on my next project.
Carlos, thank you.
Yeah, on a project this size, we're doing a 90,000 square feet office building. Crowdfunding, sometimes it's a little too much work, and the way we never consider it really.
Not even?
No.
Great. How do you see the market? How do you see the market really today? Well, we just heard good things and only good things, but how do you see it in what you guys are doing right now?
I see the market where I think the condos are where we've reached the exposure in the condos. I think that multifamily in the urban core is, with the exception of Brickell in some areas, is going to be challenged. This is a personal opinion I have. This is not the word on the street. This is my
Challenged in what way?
Well, I believe that
going down
I think there's going to. I think that, well, it doesn't. We don't know. I mean, I was told 3 months ago that multifamily sales offices were being very aggressive in their approach to bring people in, offering 2 to 3 months, some offering good incentives. But post Hurricane Maria, I've been told that the Puerto Rican influx has had a significant impact on some of the leasing activities. So that's actually the story of Miami, always historically. Like, just when you think things might be going south, then comes in the next wave of opportunity. And so, but I do believe that we hit our peak on the land values in the areas where I do business in about 1.5 years ago, and I think that land values are going to come down. And for me, that's good because that means the return of fundamentals on some of the properties and their cash flow and all that. And I think ultimately that's healthy for the market. There are exceptions. We saw this last week, we all got news that Periconi's Marketplace in Brickell traded for the highest price per square foot in Brickell at $15.50 a foot. Amazing. So there's still a lot of interest in very key assets, but there's also a lot of land inventory. I was told by a very significant brokerage this past week that their land inventory has increased so significantly in the last 3 months that he recalled a 2005 land inventory and even suggested a moratorium in their firm in getting land inventory listings.
Great news for us.
So anyways, it's a mixed bag.
Well, I am very optimistic. As said before, I moved to commercial. Now, basically, I sell office space, and I have been dedicating the past couple of years to educate end buyers that have expressed to local realtors that they want to shift to commercial, but there is not too much inventory out there of commercial space. And I even have a couple of videos in YouTube. They're in Spanish now, but being translated, subtitled, where we try to explain the Latin American market in particular, why it is a good investment to own a condo office and just rent, lease it to a solid tenant and do not have all the headache of a residential that has a contract that ends every year. So said this, I am very optimistic in continuing with this success. We have had condo sales in the past, and we truly believe it will continue.
Yeah, adding to that, we definitely see a lot of the South American buyer trying to get into commercial now. They've been investing on the residential side for so much time. And of course, nowadays, even clients that we have are looking into their assets now, which are returning 1-2% on their residential luxury condos, most of them, right on the beach or on Brico. And they're trying to see how they go into something different, diversify a little bit of their portfolio. But sometimes when they want to go into the commercial side, they find themselves with a ticket of $1 million or more. So what we found is with this kind of product, these office condos, give them the opportunity to go into a commercial product with a more stable tenant, a little more long-term commitments, 3 to 5 years on this size of offices. And we started to find that opportunity and a lot of investors looking into that. We have a ticket starting at $300,000. So for many of these investors, it's a great opportunity to diversify, look at something different, have a different kind of tenant. And that's where we're gaining our success, is the ticket price on this kind of product. Also, from the end user side, we're very optimistic as well. We got a lot of what we see is all people starting to work where they live, and we can see all of the cities becoming a little self-sufficient here. We see Doral, which used to be very industrial, coming in with a big residential portion into it. We see now Aventura, which offices was not very heard of. Now we heard of 2, 3, 4 different office projects coming into the mix to try to serve a big demand. And the end user in these emerging markets, in the smaller markets, tend to be more of the startup company, the local entrepreneur, the local lawyer, that right now have been using a lot of the co-working spaces. And they're great, but once you grow, once you become a 3-team office, or once you want more privacy, you have bigger clients, then they want the next step. And most of the market is rental office buildings, which usually they go after the big tenant, half floors, full floors, and they have forgotten about this gap in the market of the small entrepreneur, the startup company that needs only 500, 600 square feet office. And I think these small markets are great for this kind of product, and we can see keep on happening on different markets around.
Yes.
And
Talking on that.
adding to that, to end users, there are 2 factors that we have noticed. Number one, with the current interest rates, it makes a lot of sense to own your office space compared to leasing. In Aventura, the average is about $50 a square foot, including expenses, and occupancy is somewhere in 99%. It's you read 96%, but when you actually go there, you don't find what you need. You find even too small. So, and the other thing is that besides interest rates making sense to own, the other factor is that again in Latin American it is common to own your office. I understand in the U.S. it's more typical to lease. Nevertheless, we've been seeing, this influx of people from other countries that come with that mentality of owning. So that adds up. If you add the fact that you don't want to leave the area where you live, you prefer to walk if you could walk. You have the interest rates. You come with the mentality you want to own. The occupancy, 99%, you don't find. So it makes a lot of sense to buy.
Which brings my next question. how are you doing, or what are you have to tell the international either investors or buyers to become acquainted with the market, our tax laws, everything that is different from where they're coming from. So if you're coming from Latin America, then your tax structure is a little bit difficult, how they buy, how they put the money, the taxes that they have to pay when they sell. Is that a challenge for you? How do you see it, and how do you explain it to them? Because I know it's a challenge for us.
I actually defer to these gentlemen because I don't deal in transactional sales like that, but I mean, I am fascinated in what they're saying about that market.
We're recording everything you say. Yes, it is a challenge, and it gives me the opportunity to talk about the partnerships that we develop when we start a project. We think that working with the right people is key, not only to us, but to the end buyers. In our project, we have partnered with Cervera, who has the sales, Coastal, who's building, Azulin and Berlo of our attorneys that are here. But in particular, we chose a firm that is a very large CPA firm called Gerson Preston. And since we're not only not allowed, but we don't have the knowledge to explain in detail the differences for an investor from Spain or Great Britain or Colombia. We don't know. So we refer them to these big firms, and in particular, these are specialists that have dozens of employees. We refer them to them, and they create the structures where they can do what they call efficient tax structures to invest in the U.S.
Carlos?
Yeah, we also, of course, have our advisors in each of the things that we need. But Miami has always been very international, so many of the big agencies, local agencies, they are constantly going to South America to do presentations. And what they usually do is they take with them local lawyers, local accountants, professionals that will take the information with them. And that's the type of partnerships that we do with the local agencies. They're pretty much, we accompany them to these visits in South America, and pretty much they put the knowledge out for all the investors. So it's very interesting how nowadays you just knock on the door of any agency in the city, they propose you a plan to go visit a lot of the South American countries. They have their database, they have already their contacts, people that have bought before, and they just provide them with the knowledge and with the people local here that help them come over already prepared.
So it would be fair to say for you too that the most of your buyers are coming from overseas.
Well, in our case, when we design a project and we study the market and we see who's going to be the buyer, and so we prepare the approach, we divide it in 2 stages. In pre-construction stage, yes, it's internationals. If you get to a point where the building is, let's say, almost ready, and you still have inventory, then end users come in. That's our experience.
Yeah, we had the same experience. The investor usually takes most of the risk, are willing to come in at the first stage of the pre-construction process. The end user tends to come in at the end when they already see almost a finished product. But the end user, either way, who's coming in to buy nowadays on our project is also Latin American who are currently living here, who are local already residents, but tend to have what he was mentioning before, the mentality of buying versus leasing. They tend to have that mentality. They like it. If my business doesn't work, at least I have the properties left for me. And for the long term, they always look it for as an inheritance for their family or things on those terms. So they always like to have that.
Yeah, to add to that, and this is a subject that I know you like, Jose, I have seen that it is or it should be as part of the skills of the realtor or the broker to be able to guide or educate his buyer, because if they come from overseas, they will not know everything. I mean, you cannot be good at FERPTA at the same time, the IRS and investing. So, I mean, it has been a challenge for us to work in this area, and that's why we dedicate time to educate the buyers in that sense.
So William, what are you focusing on right now on Little Havana? Or where are you focusing on?
We're seeing unique trends in the area that I'm in. We're hyper-focusing on very specific parts because we see that rent in a few blocks is commanding a lot more than rents in some of the other, in the peripheries. So we've been doing really unique types of retail leasing where even to like shipping container type uses, courtyard type uses. In some of our projects, we've totally eliminated parking because just the land adjacent to retail space has become very valuable in the urban core. And with the progression of Uber and Lyft and those types of resources, and the density, the proximity that we've been talking about today of the apartment buildings and the mixed use and the condos starting to provide lifestyle more lifestyle on the street front. We're seeing just unique opportunities to create more value for properties, just existing properties and more value. We continue to buy properties, but I like to say that we're in a moment where those are kind of like diamond in the rough opportunities. It's certainly not the aggressive buying opportunities that existed, let's say, through 2014 and 15. Just got like anything else, there's opportunities, there's plenty of opportunity out in the market, you just got to hunt it.
So I'm going to throw you a question that's very dear to us, realtors, commercial brokers. How do you see the tax on commercial leases affecting your business? Do you see any effect? That we're the only state in the country that charges sales taxes on commercial leases.
Well, that's a give and take. We also don't have the income tax, in the state, and that's a big part of it. In New York City, they take 50% right off your income.
Yeah, but as far as have you heard anybody coming to lease from you that said, I didn't expect that 6% on top of everything paying, or?
I've never gotten the pushback. I know some of the businesses we have also fall under the tourist tax, so we also have to pay, in some cases, 1% additional to the 6%. It is a complaint that I have recently spoken with the county commissioners about because I know that we're paying into the 1% and only, I believe, certain areas of the county are the beneficiaries of the 1%. But I never really had pushback on that. The property taxes, there's big pushback on. The insurance costs we should all be mindful of because they're always, you never know where these insurance companies are headed, especially in lieu of the storms that we've had. But those are the big expenses. When you start to talk about the pass-throughs and the CAMs, yes, the sales tax is a big thing, but I'd much rather have the sales tax than a 15 to 20% income tax in the state.
How about you guys? How do you see it? And
we don't lease, actually, we only sell. And when I have been a user, they don't accept complaints, so it is what it is.
You just sell and that's it.
Landlords are landlords.
The small tenant tends to always have, of course, their opinion on it. Big companies, they know how the dynamics of the market. But when you get the small tenant, they're usually a startup company, they're just coming and they just think that it's just like renting the residential condo or apartment. They do get really shocked about the 6%.
I have just the last question, and we open it to the public. Is how do you see interest rates are going up? We know that. What's going to happen with your specific product? Is it going to affect it, or you don't see a big change on it?
I would say I've tried to capture the interest rates in this environment for every asset that I've had. There's one or two assets that we're stabilizing right now, and the second they stabilize, I will go to the market. It is a concern of ours that the rates will climb. Those rates that were in the Treasury, connected to the Treasury yield, have gone up over 1 point since last year, especially in the multifamily, and that absolutely has an impact on the ability to take multifamily pricing higher and realize that capital that you can take out. So we're mindful of it, but rates at 4.5. I mean, we still think that's cheap.
Free money.
Yeah.
Free.
Yeah, same. I agree with him.
All right. Before I just open it to you guys, what do you guys want to see from brokers, from us, from realtors? I know you are realtors also, but what do you want to see? I asked that question, and I always try to ask that question because that's one of the reasons we come to this. Is okay, how do I interact with the builders? How do I interact with them? What do you guys expect from brokers?
It's a very interesting question because we have a commercial product, but most of our success has been through residential brokers actually on our side. Because of the ticket price, most of the commercial brokers are not very much interested of a $300,000 ticket. So our residential brokers have actually brought in, I would say, 70–80% of our sales currently in our projects. So we would like to encourage, of course, everyone to try to get also that small investor looking for the $300,000, $500,000 ticket, and also encourage him to come over, of course.
Well, I would like, if possible, more to get more in connection, one-on-one, so we can show exactly what we have to offer. Like you said, residential and realtors are bringing a lot of sales. It has been our experience as well, and that's because residential buyers, international investors, are looking for commercial, but these realtors don't have the knowledge. So we have to spend time with them, and they have to be willing to learn how to sell this product and show an amortization table, cross it with a long-term lease and with a CAM, so the numbers make sense for the investor, and they see like, wow, where was this before? And with commercial brokers who do have the experience, maybe there has not been that many condo office projects through the years. I mean, there have been, but maybe it's becoming a little bit more popular, and they've been dealing mostly with, let's say, entire shopping malls or land or multifamily buildings. So since there are these smaller ticket products, we also have offices starting in the 300s. Maybe there is a new window for these brokers to reach out to different type of investors and show them, hey, there is this. So that's what more integration maybe.
And I would simply just say that the brokers constantly to keep learning the practices of running pro formas and understanding the costs related and underwriting the property before they take it out to market, so that they can have a intellectual dialogue with the potential buyers.
See, that was exactly my intention on the question. Is we need to study more as brokers, as commercial brokers. We really need to study more. We really need to be able to present. Any questions? Yes.
We have one here and one here. Is this on?
I don't think so. Yes, I think.
While we take this question, one of you, what is the worst mistake you made in real estate, and what did you learn from it?
Whoa. Why did he grab the mic?
I will say that we buy most of our assets. The worst mistake I ever did was take a 10-year master lease on a property. It was awful. We had it leased up in year one. We had huge excitement. It was in downtown. It was at the Macy's property on Flagler in downtown. And it was great. Everybody was leased up. We had great traction going on in downtown. When one or two of those tenants fail, which they do, small businesses fail naturally, we did not have enough time in the remaining lease term to be able to cycle back to that tenant. So I will never, ever take a master lease on a piece of property. It's either own it or don't touch it for us. That was my big burn.
Go ahead.
Too much leverage in the early 2000s.
We all did.
And now our group basically buys the lands free and clear, and that gives more security for us and again for the end buyers.
I think underestimate Miami during the last recession. I don't think we thought it was coming this strong after. So a lot of good opportunities were left behind, I think. But
That's true.
All right.
All right, Ricardo Rios from Realty World. Have a lending background, and you just brought up the fact of really underwriting before showing the commercial properties. What is a trend that you're seeing in the SBA, the Small Business Administration? Are you seeing more people acquiring your properties through the SBA, or a downward trend?
Don't be shy.
Well, what we do in our projects, actually, we're about to start. I see a company here. We're going to talk to them at the end, Gibraltar. What we do is that we bring in a preferred lender that, well, does the job of helping close the sale. And in particular, in our case, we sell to doctors in some cases, and we have seen how these lending companies offer a product that has a portion of SBA and a portion of regular, and these end buyers can afford a purchase with only 10% down, 5% down, and that's thanks to that. So I think it's great.
By the way, Gibraltar Bank, private bank, is both a lender and does SBA loans. So I want to mention that.
Go ahead, Alfonso.
This question is for Bill. Little Havana and 8th Street is just, I think, a very important part of all Miami. And we've seen that in this cycle, pretty much many of the properties traded hands. And the other unique thing about 8th Street is because it has T680, so you pretty much can have density over there. What do you think is going to happen on the next cycle with Calle 8? How is it going to be connected to Brickell, to all the high density, and what would you like it to happen?
So I'm sensitive to only 3 blocks, and that's the touristic district. I don't want to see any mid-rise or high-rise on those 3 blocks. I mean, from 17th Avenue to 14th Avenue, because I think that is the essence of the neighborhood in a sense. A lot of the smaller structural, the historical scale. We own several properties in there, and I will say that those properties for me are historically preserved without having that mark by the city. But we already saw in this cycle, you know, Henry Torres built a very successful project on In-Town. I think we're going to see a lot of similar types of projects come in. I know there was a lot of trading of land that happened in this cycle where I don't know if that's going to leave the ground, but it will eventually. I mean, for me, Brickell is a no-brainer. I mean, I'm sorry, Little Havana is a no-brainer because it's just, you know, to the west of Brickell, it's squeezed between Coral Gables, and the density's there and the lifestyle's there. And so, like I said, all of the urban core has got so much opportunity and growth that Little Havana is no different in that sense.
We have time for one more question. We have one right here. You're not going to ask what the worst.
That was a good question. I have a question regarding Amendment 2, which is the amendment to continue the 10% cap on non-homesteaded properties that's going to be on the ballot in 2018. Bill, you as an investor and both of you as developers, how would that affect the pro formas that you were talking about if it weren't to pass?
I still have no understanding of the property tax. There's no rhyme or reason to it. We buy properties that I believe are overpriced. They never get reset. I know there's a standard that people use to say it's 80% of the purchase price. You know, I'm sure a lot of people have opinions on that. The one thing that I'll say, I was so excited when I heard about that regulation of the cap, but a lot of people don't know that the school board portion is not taxed. And when you're talking about properties, for example, a site that we control in Brickell, the school board portion is significant. And that all gets passed on to our retail tenants. So the cap is attractive, don't get me wrong. Any cap is fantastic with regards to those types of expense, but the fact that the school board can continue to float like that is very material at the end of the line. I'm not making the point that the school board should not benefit from as much income as possible, but I would continue to favor the cap because I think that we have to have some type of controls and let our elected officials know that it's not just going to be an open pipeline of tax revenue and that they have to work within their parameters.